Hello, welcome to Hope Church Harrogate's Message of the Week. If you'd like to connect with us, please head over to hopeharrogate.co.uk/connect. We'd love to hear from you.
Hello. I diligently did my sound check this morning, and then my children both decided to play with the headset, so I wasn't at all confident it was going to work. But my name's Dan. I'm here to continue our series on Habakkuk, which is, as Adam says, everyone's favorite book in the Bible. Can you remember the word that we had from last week? Seek. Very good. So we're doing 4 words in Habakkuk, and the second word is authentic. So we have race through there we go. Authentic. Habakkuk, if you've got a British English accent, or Habakkuk, if you've got an American English accent, or Habakkuk, if you are Geordie. What does authentic mean, though? In our kind of Instagram, Snapchat generation, being authentic is all about letting people into your real letting people into your real world, letting people see what it's really like to be you. It's about being, you might have heard phrases like be true to yourself, bring your all to it, follow your heart. That's what it means to be authentic, right? It means speaking your truth. And I would say that all those things are absolutely right. That is exactly what it means to be authentic. But it's really the definition of what you is in there, being yourself, speaking your truth. Who is you? Because the world would define you really as being you and your desires, right? What you want to do defines who you are, or who you want to be with defines who you are. And we see this especially in areas of identity in gender and sexuality, but it's all over the place. And really a biblical definition of you and who you are is who you are in relationship to other people. It's your relationships that really define who you are. If I take it to an extreme to try and highlight where it falls down, if I am my desires, if that's what defines me, then I would say that I don't really want to take the bins out tonight. And so I'm not going to do that because that wouldn't be authentic. That would mean not being true to myself. And yet I live in a house where I have responsibilities because I'm in a family. And so if I don't do that, then actually that's not being true to who I am, because I'm a father and a husband and I need to care for my family. I don't really want to go to work on Tuesday because I've got this meeting that's quite boring. And so if I'm true to myself, I would take the day off. I would go to the beach instead. If I was true to myself, then I would say visiting my nana in the care home is sometimes quite boring, and I don't really want to do that. But I'm a grandson, and if she's there and she's lonely, then being in relationship means that authenticity requires me to fulfill my relational obligations. I am not just my desires. I am a father and a husband, and a church leader, an employee. I'm a neighbor. I'm a team member. I'm a friend. And especially, I'm a child of God and a friend of Jesus. We'll go over to Habakkuk now, shall we? We're covering about half the book today because we're looking at all of the words that Habakkuk says. So we're going to skip over the bits where God responds to Habakkuk and just look at how he speaks. And this kind of face-to-face relationship. Moses spoke to God as if they were face-to-face. David had a heart-to-heart relationship with God. And 2 Corinthians says that we now can speak as with unveiled faces. We have access. And so Habakkuk only has a foreshadowing of this, right? The kind of relationship that we can have with Jesus. And so if we see how he does it, how much more can we be authentic with God? So we'll start by reading just the first 4 verses. I'm going to read it off the screen. I'm going to summarize it in advance because it's quite hard to understand some of it. He's basically saying, my people are unrighteous, they're violent, and your law, God, is powerless. He says, how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. When he says the law is powerless, he's remembering the law itself, Deuteronomy 28, right at the end of the Torah section of the Bible, where the whole of Israel gathers and they pronounce like their commitment to follow the law. And they say, yes, if we follow this, we know that God is going to bless us. And they say, yes, we know that if we disobey, there will be curse. We will be separated from God. Well, bad things are going to happen to us. And they make this big kind of thing on two mountains. It's a whole thing. Go and read it. But this isn't happening. You know, they're doing violence and unrighteousness, and there is no judgment coming. And so Habakkuk's angry, and he's confused, and he wonders, is God completely impotent? Is there even any point in praying? These are some big questions and some big doubts, right? And so what does he do? He turns to God, and he brings those questions to him. So the first point I want to make about being authentic is that it requires you to bring all of yourself. Right? Your doubts, your worries, your confusion, all of it, bring it before God. When we do baptism prep, and if you'd have been baptized in this church for the last 2 years or so, you'll have heard me say, let me just try and put you off it for a minute, because it's not something you want to do unless you're really sure that you want to do it. You have to know that there isn't a single thing in your life that you wouldn't lay down if Jesus asked you to. If you can say, yeah, there's nothing, I would give up anything, then you're ready to get baptized. But it seems like, so lost myself there. Bring all of yourself requires that anything that is part of you and what you have and who you are, you're prepared to give it up for him. Wrestling through questions and doubts like that produces faith. It lays the foundations and checks that they're solid. If you don't do that, if you sort of have these questions and doubts at the back of your mind and you just leave them there at the back of your mind, then when crisis comes, you discover that the foundations are pretty shaky and your faith can be knocked over. Wrestling through it with God, and especially in community with other people as well, really produces faith and perseverance. Be like Job, who when is completely confused says, I don't know what's happening, but I trust God, I know he's good. And not his wife who tells him, curse God and die. Do we teach our kids to be authentic as well? I remember when I learned to pray as a kid, and my parents taught me, you can go to God with anything, no matter what you need, no matter what you're going through, no matter what problems you're having, you can go to God and you can ask him for help, no matter what. And it's a really good message to have, but it's only one half of our lives, really, is what we need. If we say that whatever you need, ask God for it, he becomes like a vending machine where I need this, please, God. I need this, please, God. We also need to go to him in our highs and our ups, when we're thankful, when we're grateful, when we're living in blessing, when we've got abundant supply. We can go to God and say, oh, how can I use this, God? Where should we partner together to spend this money? Where should we partner together to use my time? Imagine for a moment that your friend comes to you and says, oh, I know this person who you get on with so well. I think you two could be like best friends. Has anyone ever been set up as a friend like that? In that first meeting, when you meet this person, it's like going on a first date, isn't it? what, what do you say? Like, do you want to be my friend? It's awkward, isn't it? But imagine your friend has said, this person, they would just be so compatible with you. I can just imagine you being like, yeah, lifelong friends. And then you meet them and you discover that it's the CEO of your company. Do you go, this is amazing? Because now I can ask for the toilets to be cleaned properly. I can ask for a raise. I can ask for a better office. Does that person who could have been your lifelong best friend suddenly become a vending machine? Or do you see them for the person they are, build a relationship, build deep connection, and you gain so much more than just that vending machine boss? It's the way of Jesus, right? He shared his whole life with people. He didn't say, what do you need? Let me give it to you. But he walked alongside people. He loved people. And he drew close to people. So Habakkuk then seems like he's in a place of lament, really. He's got questions. He's got doubts. He's angry. Can anyone remember, digging back 2 years ago, we did a series on lament, and there were 4 steps. Does anyone remember what they were? Even one of them. Good. Bring a complaint. I don't remember them. That's good. Bring your complaint was one of them. Say that again. Choose to trust was the last one. Very good. Return to God. Ask boldly was the other one. I think we've got a slide. I hope we've got. There we go. So you can be reminded. It was a long time ago, and probably a lot of the people in this room have joined the church since then. So that's fair enough. 4 steps of lament, as according to Adam. Return to God, bring a complaint, ask boldly, and choose to trust. And we're going to read the next section of Habakkuk in a minute, which starts at verse 12, if you've got your own Bibles out. And we're going to sort of see how he walks through this journey himself. I'll summarize it again for you in advance because it's helpful, I think. And his big question is, I should probably tell you what God says to him first, shouldn't I? So Habakkuk says to God, when are my people going to be judged? And God says, don't worry, I'm raising up Babylon. They're going to come and wipe you out. And so Habakkuk kind of basically goes, you what? And his big confusion is how they're more evil than we are. How can evil be purged by more evil? Is that really just? So shall we read the next section? Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made people like the fish in the sea, like the sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet, and so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. So he does turn to God. He says, God, you're eternal. You're immortal. I really want it to go invisible next. You are sovereign. You are good. He turns to God. He reminds himself of who God is. And he brings his complaint. He says, I'm confused. I'm worried by this. The whole thing about fish is like in Genesis, when you see the creatures created, he creates the creepers and he creates the swarmers and he creates the teemers. And so he describes He describes people like the swarmers. He says, we're supposed to be that day 6 creation, but we're like the creatures now who are all just swarming about on the earth. We're supposed to be the ones that rule over all the animals, but now we've got no ruler. We're like all these creatures being picked off by the enemy. He asks boldly, he says, is this really just? Explain yourself, God. And then he says, right, I've said what I need to say. I'm going to wait for your answer. That's his moment of choosing to trust. He does slightly forget his original issue, that my own people are unrighteous and violent. And suddenly he's like, oh, we're like the fish of the sea. We've not done anything wrong. We're just being picked off. And my second point then is that it's really helpful to put your thoughts into words. And some people, I'm sure, in this room will have a practice of journaling, of writing down their thoughts that they want to share just with God. I'm sure many people also pray out loud. I want to encourage you that those two are really good practices to have, because you can tolerate a lot that's in your unspoken thoughts. But when you say it out loud, you go, oh, but we're totally innocent. And you go, is that right? A lot of lies can hide in your thoughts, but when they're out in the world, they become exposed. Jesus himself prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. And you have to wonder, did he hear himself say out that out loud and then go, I know that's not your will. He says, yet not what I will, but what you will. Did that happen to him there, that even as he spoke it, he went, no, I know what has to happen. Just want to take a slight detour to talk about the sovereignty of God and God's punishment, which is kind of described here. We see that the wicked are not always punished. And so it's just really helpful to remember that when you see people in the world that appear to be thriving, although you might describe them as wicked people, it doesn't mean that God is endorsing their behavior. It just means that we've got to trust his timing. And similarly, when disaster comes, it's not a sign of God's judgment on people. It's just really helpful to remember both of those things, that God's sovereignty is not a black and white thing that you can go, well, clearly they deserve that then. If we don't remember that, it can lead to disillusionment, or why bother being good? Why bother following what we know to be God's wisdom if we don't understand that and remember that? So God answers Habakkuk by saying, don't you worry, Babylon's going to get punished as well. I've got this covered. There are 5 woes, which I'm sure Adam will talk about next week when we come back to the rest of chapter 2. And we're going to skip ahead to chapter 3, which is a song. It would look completely in place in the book of Psalms. It's a prayer that is filled with Old Testament stories as Habakkuk remembers what God has done. But it also kind of really clearly follows on from the first 2 chapters. But it's a long one. I just want to see how many of these sort of Old Testament ideas that you in the room can recognize. So this is the prayer of Habakkuk on Shigionoth, which I assume is the melody. I don't know. No one seems to know. It says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. Teman and Mount Paran, I had to look it up, are places associated with being very near Mount Sinai. So we're thinking Exodus sort of time. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Plague went before him, and pestilence followed his steps. What do we think plagues and pestilence might relate to? In Egypt, absolutely. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed, but he marches on forever. What story could that relate to, do you think? Could be Sodom and Gomorrah. I wonder if it was Jericho. Yes, Jericho. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Can anyone remember any Midianite characters in the Bible? Yeah, Moses' family, Jethro, his father-in-law, and Zipporah, his wife, they were from Midian. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? Louder. Yeah, could have been the Jordan, could have been the Red Sea. One of those sort of, it looks like God is being violent to the water. And the question is, was he really violent to the water? Was he violent to the people? What the story actually makes me think of is in Lord of the Rings, when they get across the river into Rivendell, and you see the horses in the water coming down to rescue them. I'm positive that story is referencing the crossing of the Red Sea itself, as Tolkien did all the time. So, yeah, you can imagine God's horses coming in the river. You uncovered your bow, you called for many arrows, you split the earth with rivers. Can anyone think of when God uncovered his bow? After the flood, we normally call it a rainbow. But God uncovered his bow in the sky. The mountains saw you and writhed, torrents of water swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. I think this is all Noah. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens, and the glint of your flying arrows, the lightning of your flashing spear. And we know when the sun and moon stood still. Hezekiah, Joshua, when Joshua fought against Gibeon, he was fighting in the valley, and then the sun stood still for an extra day. It says, never happened again, never happened before, but stayed up long enough for them to wipe out their enemies. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. I don't know what this is. Anyone know? It could be any story, couldn't it? You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. With his own spear you pierced his head when his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. Anyone got any ideas who that could be? Could be at the siege of Jerusalem. There's one person who I'm thinking they cut off his own head with his own sword. Goliath, yeah. I wonder if that's a Goliath story. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waters. I heard the transition now. This is now him. Think back to chapters 1 and 2. He's heard what God's going to do. And my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. What a transformation in where Habakkuk was from, how can you do that, God, to, okay. So the fig tree does not bud. There are no grapes on the vines. The olive crop fails and the fields produce no food. There are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. Sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. It's quite a different place to where he was a chapter before. Even if every source of food fails, I mean, that is disaster upon disaster for the entire nation. Adam talked last week about the buds in December that you see, which are promises of what's to come if you know to look. This is saying even if the buds aren't there in December, even if it looks like there's no life coming back next year, still, I'll trust you. I'll rejoice because you are my Savior. And so my third point about being authentic is that we trust in the mystery. Habakkuk doesn't know how this is going to end. Babylon's coming to wipe them out, and yet I know that God is good. I know that he is powerful. I know that he is able to carry out his will, whatever he determines. And that's enough to know that I can trust him, even though I don't understand all the bits in between. I don't suppose Habakkuk could have imagined God's plan to send his own son to die on a cross, to be the way he was going to redeem the whole world. If he couldn't see how Babylon was going to end up being okay, and yet he trusted, even we on this side of Jesus, looking back and knowing what happened, I think there's still just a huge mystery for me. Why on earth did Jesus have to die still? Surely there was another way. Why would he do that when I know I don't deserve it? How can death defeat death? That same question of how can evil purge evil? How can death defeat death? Why does he love me so much? There's still plenty of mystery in the gospel, even though we look at it as history. But as long as we know that God is good, he is powerful enough to carry out his will, then we can trust him in all of the mystery. And that enables us to come before him completely authentically with whatever we have,